and welcome to Tim's BMW repairs and information. Well, I've often heard it said, yeah, my old BMW, not quite as powerful as it used to be, but it's still going. Well, if your BMW was made from, excuse me while I accelerate and show the 650's full power, yeah, 0 to 60 in just short of 5 seconds. Yeah, it's not bad, is it, for a 15-year-old car? Yeah, often said, yeah, old BMW, not as much power as it used to have. But as I said, there's absolutely no reason that a BMW built after 1988 shouldn't have the same power now as it did when it was built. Now, in the olden days with the iron V8s, cylinder bores were made out of steel liners, and the old piston rings used to wear through them slowly, and slowly you'd lose compression. And that's where your power went. It was all blow-by gases going into the crankcase. Yeah, it didn't do the crankcase ventilation system any good either. But with a BMW made from 1988 onwards, cylinder bores are made out of an alloy of silicon carbide. Yeah, that's tough, that is. And with a silicon carbide bore, there's no reason that you're going to lose compression. And for that reason, you should have the same power today as when the car was built. But there are two things that rob you of power, that slowly cause problems, that diagnostics and the ECU, DME don't even notice. No, you slowly run out of power and they won't tell you a thing. Yeah, two things. First one is the MAF. Now, of course, with a MAF, with the modern fuel injection systems, you have a MAF, and you also have lambda sensors that measure the fuel air mixture. We're through. Whoa, a bit of a tight one. Go on, you can do it. Power out of the corner. That's why I love the 650. It's just got so much oomph. Lovely to drive. No messing about with a 650, that's for sure. Ooh, second gear corner this one. Whoa, bit slippery. The old Falcons are holding on well. That's what I like about Falcons. Great tyres. Yeah, don't bother with the Potenzas. Get rid of them. Get a pair of Falcons. 4 Falcons. Jobs are good and all that power gets planted rather than just the ASC coming on. Anyway, I'm getting off the point. Yeah, maths. Yeah, you would have thought diagnostics will say, excuse me, there's something wrong with the MAF, and they'd bung up an error code. Light would come on the dashboard, but no, not unless they actually go open circuit or short circuit. That DME says, no, that appears to be working fine, sir. I'm not going to mention it at all. Unfortunately, MAFs do slowly get more and more inaccurate. Now, of course, with adaptations, when you're cruising, like we are now, nice 70 mile an hour cruise, I'll stick the cruise control on there. Yeah, if you're cruising along, yeah, the fuel air mixture is being reined in by the lambda sensors. The MAF can measure more or less what it likes within reason, and the lambda sensors will tell the DME, yeah, you're a bit rich there, mate, yeah, you're over measuring the air. Yeah, and so the DME cuts down on the fuel injection and you're back to your lovely 15:1 ratio or 14.7:1 ratio, just right for cruising. But the problem is that when you're actually demanding lots of power and you've got your foot flat down on the floor, lambda sensors aren't used. No, they're completely ignored. It's just sort of extrapolated from the previous values that it returned, and the adaptations, of course. Now, at full throttle, yep, the lambda sensor's out of the circuit. So, yep, if the MAF misreads and you're too rich or you're too lean, then you just don't get any top-end power. And that's the first thing you notice with a failing MAF. Had that on my first E31, that was the problem with that. It was fine, not too bad, lots of power, and then you're just slowly getting less power at the top end. It was fine when you're cruising, don't really notice any difference. But at full power, yeah, the power went down and the fuel consumption went up. And yeah, that was a MAF. Swapped it for a brand new one from BMW, about 300 quid, even those about 15 years ago that was. So they're not cheap. and that fixed it completely. It was lovely after that. We had the full power back, firing on all 8. Yeah, that's a way to have an engine running. But no, the maths can misread. So if you get a sort of slow reduction in top end power, not cruise power, which is the Lambda sensors can sort out, but top end power, and you've got your foot flat on the throttle and the revs are going up to 5.5, yeah, that can well be the math. Now the problem with maths is they're expensive, and also you're tempted by cheap Chinese ones. That's the problem. Never buy a Chinese math. It won't do you any good at all. I tried this years and years ago with my E38, my 740. The math was misreading, it was just getting tired, as they do. So I put in a Chinese one. It was only about 40 quid. I mean, compared to the 300 quid for the original one from BMW, yeah, it does tempt you. Yeah, you've got all these eBay adverts tempting you into buying one. But no, don't go for it. Yeah, one of the main problems with that math was that when it was warm, it just completely misread. And of course, that meant that if you'd parked up in a car park and then you wanted to leave it 10 minutes later, yeah, the engine just wouldn't start. It wasn't in the slightest bit interested. And if you could get it to start, it would stall again as soon as you put it in gear. Yeah, it was a terrible thing. Yeah, sure, got my full power back, but had very poor starting characteristics. Yeah, not good at all. Yeah, that's been a nice drive in the 650 today. Yeah, lots of wiggly bits, lots of full power operation. Yeah, great fun. Yeah, you've got to give the old 650 the full beans sometimes, really. They don't like being mollycoddled. That will block up your cats. Yep, and eventually get smoking due to the crankcase ventilation system getting blocked up. Yeah, you do need to give them quite a lot of welly sometimes. It keeps them well oiled and operating in its correct method. Second gear corner, that's what we like. Oh, we're away. Right, well, we've discussed the math and how at high air volumes it can misread, and then you end up with the wrong fuel-air mixture going into the front of the engine. The only thing you notice is a slight lack of power and an increased consumption of fuel. Now, the second one we're going to look at today, of course, is the exhaust system. Now, if you can't get hot exhaust gases out the back of the car, you can't get air in at the front. It will get squashed in the middle and burns your exhaust valves, especially on cylinders 4 and 8. Now we're talking about catalytic converters. It's very unusual for anything else to block up an exhaust system, but catalytic converters can fail. They'll do it slowly over time. They can melt, especially if your crankcase ventilation system isn't working quite well and you get a lot of oil through the system. It does tend to clog them up and overheat them. In that situation, you slowly end up with a situation where you're cruising, it's perfectly fine and it starts perfectly fine, but when you demand a lot of power from the engine, and that's a lot of exhaust flow, then the engine starts losing power. And in extremes, as happened with this E31, it went on to 4 cylinders because one of the catalytic converters broke up and blocked the exit from the housing of the catalytic converter, and that stopped all airflow or gas flow in its entirety. Now the funny thing was that if you turn the engine off and then restart it again, it would work fine again, well, until you put your foot flat on the throttle, and then a bit of the honeycomb would come out and block up the exhaust again. Now in other situations they can just sort of melt a bit, especially again with crankcase ventilation problems, where if you've got enough oil around going through the exhaust systems, they do tend to overheat and then melt at the front face. In those situations you don't really notice a lack of power, it just comes on very slowly. But if you've replaced the MAF and you still haven't got enough power, then it's time to have a look at the exhaust system. And BMW wants 1,700 quid, or about $2,000, just for the catalytic converters alone, let alone all the fitting. And so I went to Matt Dennis and got a couple of sports cats fitted, and they're 200 cell. That means they're of course a honeycomb than the 400 cell ones used by BMW. And the difference was night and day. It really was. When I left Matt Dennis's, I couldn't believe the amount of power the car had got again. You get more power with 200 cell cats than you do with 400 cell cats because you get much better gas flow throughout the whole car. Of course, the problem with catalytic converters is the lack of power is gradual, and it is so gradual that you just don't notice it. Well, you don't notice it until you have something changed like the catalytic converters, and suddenly you've got a brand new car again. You're back up to the power that it was when the car was built. Okie dokie, that'll do for today. That's 2 things that cause problems that don't give diagnostic codes, and the DME hasn't got a clue what's going on. The MAF and the exhaust system, and in particular the cat. Well, stick the thumbs up if that's helped you. Keep subscribing and keep commenting. I'm more or less caught up with the comments now, but if there's anyone waiting, just put a new one on and I'll reply to that one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.